consecutive years of positive total return. It, as of today, down 31% from its peak. That's exactly the amount we dropped from the pre-COVID peak to the COVID low. Of course, that 31% decline in COVID was 20 sessions. This one's been 6 months. But let's look at a few charts and try to figure it out together. So these are charts you've seen before. There are any number of reference points, but as good as any is the prior high, the pre-COVID level. And you can see there, were we simply to go down to where we were before COVID struck, we would drop another 14% from here. Now, if you look at that same chart and move forward, what would be the peak to trough decline? It would be then 42%. Now, certainly the NASDAQ 100 dropped 84% in the .com. It dropped 54% in the 2007-2009. So it's perfectly possible. Let's look at the same sequencing in the S&P, 2 charts. The first is the reference point, the pre-COVID high. Were we to simply get down to that high, that's 10% more from here. And then another way to look at it, second iteration, what would the peak to trough decline be? Were we to get there, it would be 30%. So these things have to be considered. I think the important thing is, to your question, was the damage is substantial. Money's been lost, and there are a lot of people trapped above, not to mention people who've yet to even sell a single share. Let's look at Apple, though, because it is the big one. And this final chart is Apple's relative performance to the S&P. And so a ratio chart is simply taking one thing divided by the other and plotting it as a line. And what we know, of course, is that Apple's relative performance essentially peaked more than 2 years ago. And it is now at risk of breaking to the downside. And I have to think that that's likely, that Apple's underperformance day over day, week over week continues.
Wow. Carter, thank you. We'll see you in a bit on Options Action. Carter Braxton Worth of Worth Charting. Bonawyn, is Apple investable here?
Investable, yes, because that implies that your time horizon is much longer. Mm-hmm. It's probably not the right time to get, a bit longer, it's probably not the right time to trade it for a short-term bounce. I mean, I don't think this is like a low or the right entry point, if that's what you're asking me. In terms of, do I think you can start to deploy some capital because you have a long-term thesis about the stock? Yes, but I would have said the same thing $10 ago.
Tim, you agree?
It's interesting. It's almost like you're trying to trick us with the question. And Bonawyn didn't fall for it, by the way. Get mad. I believe Apple's going lower, and I want to wait for that guide. I don't think I'm going to hear unbridled demand. I don't think I'm going to hear full steam ahead. I don't think I'm going to hear about a new refresh cycle before I get some kind of a warning. I think 125 is assured on Apple, and I'd kind of like to see it get a little bit lower. No one's going to ring a bell for you, and I think investors can start to nibble at Apple here. But I do think it's going to trade lower.
This whole market feels like we're just waiting for people just to lay out the worst case scenario. We're waiting for Jerome Powell to say, you know what, 75 or 100 is on the table.
We're making lower lows every day.
Or for the companies to say, you know what, the consumer's getting soft. Yeah. We don't know what the impact is going to be. Let's put it out there and move on.
But this is not unheard of, Mel. Do you remember the second day of January in 2019? Apple literally posted the first trading day. You remember they posted a first pre-announcement, a negative pre-announcement of the company in like a decade or something like that. And the stock got creamed. Now, that was the low. Do you remember that? If split adjusted, it was like $40. So I guess my point is like this might start, we might see in the next, I don't know, month or so, or it's probably going to be early July, the first 2 weeks of July before earnings season, some negative pre-announcements. We might see it even before that, before the quarter's over. And that will be maybe when we start to see near-term capitulation, and maybe we get to some of the levels that Carter is mentioning in the S&P.
Coming up, earnings in Davos and JP Morgan Investor Day. Oh my, find out what our traders are watching in the week ahead. We'll break it all down. But first, Tesla tanking. What is investors pumping the brakes on this one? That trade and more when Fast Money returns.